Alright, 2 weeks have passed, and I found some free time, recording this just before I head into class. School started just recently, and figuring out that schedule has been kind of interesting, especially given that my work schedule is pretty much all over the place, but hey, figuring it out, putting in work here and there where I can, just, doing another check-in and actually getting down to some things I found interesting over these last couple of weeks. To begin with, probably the thing that I was most excited about, there was a new chapter of Black Lagoon that came out. Kind of a rare event these days. Chapter 116. And quite frankly, it's a chapter that I absolutely love. Mostly because it finalized an idea that I had imagined the series was going in. Specifically, the last three arcs dealt with a Roanapur that has been dealing with an encroachingly connected world. So, with El Baile de la Muerte, you had Roberta and more specifically the NSA being involved in Roanapur. Now, they were just transient, they were there, but Rock, as a character, now that he's gone through essentially breaking down all of his by the time he gets to Fujiyama Gangsta Paradise, once you get to that arc, we're getting to a point where Rock is realizing he can't really bring Roanapur a new sense of morality just by saying, no, this is wrong. He decides to start acting, trying to change things. That's when he gets, when he starts negotiating with Bao Laika and starts trying to figure out how can I win this game, and get the actual goals I want. He fails. He fails, and that plays a big part in El Baile de la Muerte, where Rock decides to break even more the rules that he's kind of held within himself. And that's where we see probably Rock at his lowest. That is him at his most nihilistic as a character. And for the most, he succeeds in getting one goal, which is getting the NSA out of Roanapur, but he fails in the other goal, and he has that discussion with Chang about how he wanted Roanapur to realize that they could not continue to be what they were, that they had to realize the world was far bigger than they were, and Roanapur was shrinking, metaphorically, that this last bastion of no rules, balls to the wall, criminal lifestyle, it's got to change on some level, and he failed in that aspect. And then it was the arc after that, the Wired Red Wild Card, where the CCP got involved. China got involved, and suddenly that was a whole other world player. So you had the United States, then you had China, and Rock initially wants nothing to do with it. He's failed 2 times already. He's already at that point where he's just I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not the guy. But he gets encouraged. It all works out in the end, and not only does he win, he succeeds in getting, I think it was the Italians. Yeah, he successfully negotiates with the Italians in order to get them to kind of back down and also hire, what's-her-face, Feng. And then the arc after that, which I can't remember the name of, but it was the hunt for L'Homme Sombre, or the Dark Man, in which then it was the French. Suddenly the French are involved, and not just random French people, but the French government. So now you have 3 arcs in a row where the United States has been involved, the Chinese Communist Party has been involved, and now the European Union has been involved. And you could see in that one, in L'Homme Sombre, Roanapur finally takes it seriously. All of them get together and go, this is too much. We're no longer dealing with, criminals. Because everyone before that, everyone in all the previous arcs, were other criminals who came from other parts of the world. Either parts of the drug cartel in South America, or parts of the cartel from Florida. There was the white nationalists during Roca de las Altas. I can never remember the name of that. Goats, Gun, and Jihad were Hezbollah Like, it was generally terrorist and criminal organizations, but now you have 3 arcs where it's government forces, and Royanper is starting to actually pay attention. And chapter 116, the latest chapter, I think is the culmination of that, because the entire framework of that chapter is that Balalaika has opened up a new club that is specifically targeted towards legitimate tourism. And Chang even comments on that. He says, like, you do realize this kind of goes against our whole criminal empire thing. And Balalaika says the world is changing. So it took a while, but we actually see that Rock was not only correct, he's actually affected change. Royanper is starting to realize that their place is no longer as isolated as they could treat it, and they are starting to adapt. And you really see that in the conversation with Chang and Rock. Chang finally sits down and talks to Rock like, are you going to continue this? Are you going to continue being the like, quote unquote detective, figuring all this out? And Rock says the thing that just made me go like, oh my god, was he said, essentially, I'm going beyond good and evil, which that's I've said this to people before. There's some like light, I'm not going to say Nietzschean themes are prevalent throughout the entire thing, but I think that was probably the closest to a direct nod to Nietzschean ideas of Rock has essentially given up on the morality of not only his original life. When he originally left Japan and joined Royanper, he was essentially leaving the moral systems behind him, but he carried parts of that with him. And then he goes into Royanper and he finds their morals are also just distasteful to him. And much of his journey has been him formulating this whole, no, I'm going beyond that. I like your ideas of good and evil. I don't agree with that. I'm going to make my own. And that's a big part of Nietzsche's whole beyond good and evil concept. Part of that point of philosophy is that to reject the morality of the world around you and to sort of self-create a morality. And Rock has absolutely become that character. Essentially, the whole journey of Rock is going through an abyssal journey, like going into the darkest depths of humanity and then coming out the other end and saying, nope, I'm taking charge. This is my life, and I'm going to play it my way. And you get that throughout that entire conversation. I'm just like, yes, okay, finally. My hypothesis has been confirmed. Rock is die Ulement. Kind of joking, kind of interesting that is the direction that happened. I was semi-joking about the Nietzschean connection. I saw it, but I didn't think it was going to be that on the nose. So that was fun. Outside of Black Lagoon, I've been dabbling with LaTeX, spelled LATEX, in kind of an interesting way. I realize I can't use it for a lot right now, but I kind of realize I'm learning LaTeX now will be useful for me later, given that I'm working on getting a couple things published and being able to essentially program Word docs and PDFs. That just appeals to me, as well as I've seen what some people can pull off with LaTeX. Recently, one of the tools I use to practice is I've started writing my journal in LaTeX, and part of that was I took portions of somebody else's code, which essentially goes through multiple directories and is able to concatenate multiple files into a single PDF file, which is insanely powerful. The possibilities that LaTeX can do, not latex, LaTeX, the possibilities that LaTeX can do is actually kind of astounding, and I am pretty excited to see what else I can do with it. I mean, the biggest way I'm choosing to practice with LaTeX is essentially I'm going to try and submit all of my school assignments this semester using LaTeX, and I've already gotten a decent head start on one of them, figuring out headers, footnotes, all that. It seems unintuitive at first, but I feel like I'm getting a good sense of it. Like once I started figuring out, oh, this is how you do fancy headers. This is how you implement footnotes. This is how you add a bibliography, and here's how you can do version control and split it among, like, some of these things I've already had practice with. I like version control. I've already kind of got a base in that. So setting up sort of a local Git repository for a single tech project or LaTeX project is that was no real problem. So the biggest learning curve for me is just learning LaTeX, and specifically how not to break it, because I've already had a number of times where I put a command in the wrong spot, or I forgot that there are special characters and I didn't hit the proper escape. Stuff like that. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But then to something else, kind of just something that popped in the news, or several things that popped in the news that I've kind of been keeping an eye on, which is I've seen that there are several larger law firms now that have essentially been either creating or buying out proprietary large language models based on ChatGPT, specifically for the purpose of helping in the legal system, to assist in legal problems. I'm of two minds about this. And by that, I mean there is the optimistic view and there's the pessimistic view. Now, I've had conversations with people about artificial intelligence. I've given presentations where I touch upon the current wave of artificial intelligence. And the biggest thing that I have right now when it comes to AI is that I am fairly optimistic that current artificial intelligence tools are highly beneficial. I believe that the tools as they exist now, I don't believe that they are an intelligence in any way. They are tools. They are incredibly robust, powerful tools. And much of what it does can have the appearance of intelligence, but I don't believe anything under the surface. I don't think it's robust enough to say that it is operating under its own consciousness or that it has any conscious experience. That for me is a big part. But as tools, they are insanely powerful, and I think if somebody approaches these tools with full mind, they go in with their full creativity, and they treat things like ChatGPT or a chatbot or art generation or music. If people approach these tools as tools, I think that's going to be highly beneficial. The pessimistic side of me, and this applies just as much to these new legal bots. The pessimistic side of me is essentially that I feel like people are going to treat these tools as if they offload work. So very much in the same way that earlier tools, when it came to previously in the legal system, there has been an AI-powered system that would determine bail, and what it would do is it would go through and look at somebody's past offenses, look at where they came from, look at their level of income, look at all sorts of data points that normally a judge would not look at, and it would suggest a bail amount. And for a while there, judges stopped really questioning whether or not the tool was giving the right answer. Judges would just say, oh, it told me to set bail at $5,000, or it told me to set bail at $1,200. And they would just sort of go with what the machine was saying. And then people started to realize that because of some of the information that the bots were taking in, you would have these first-time offenders that would be getting a bail of $5,000, and then you would get people who would get a bail of $1,200, and they would both be accused of the same crime, but it was specifically socioeconomic details that were determining that. Specifically, people who came from neighborhoods where there were higher rates of crime, the AI would say that the person was more likely to recommit, and because of that, their bail was set to be higher. Now, it just so happens that when it comes to socioeconomic disparity, typically that would go after minority groups more so than white Americans. And I don't think it's because the system was specifically going, get the fucking black people. No, it was that it was taking into account socioeconomic data that really should not have been part of the algorithm overall, and it had a secondary effect of affecting one group of people more so than another. This is sort of the pessimistic side of me, in that people will start to use a tool and they will not engage with the tool as a tool. They won't think, what can I do with this and how can it go wrong? They'll just go, give me previous case law on X, and then they'll just sort of take whatever the bot spits out and they'll go, good enough. And we've already seen that. There's already been a case where somebody literally went to ChatGPT, said, hey, here's the details of the case, give me previous case law, and ChatGPT put out like cases that never happened, and the person just sort of went, good enough, and they filed that officially within a court, and they got in shit tons of trouble. And that to me is a pretty good sign that this will happen. You will have a decent number of people, and I think especially when you're talking about fields that get very rote. So, for example, vehicular accidents. You have these people who ambulance chasers. You have these guys, they have a very cookie cutter system of law, in that they find somebody who was in an accident, they have them fill out the right forms, and then it's just basically they go through the same process. It's not that they're not engaging, it's just law like that. When you're dealing with injury or personal injury law, you're probably dealing with cases that are extremely similar to one another. You might have ones that go outside of the norm, but it's something like 90% of personal injury cases are almost entirely the same, and they tend to reference the same cases. So when you have something like that, when you have a form of law that is very cookie cutter, that is very easy to just sort of get into a pattern, and then you add in this tool that kind of just smooths out some things, what happens when somebody goes, oh, I can turn my brain off more when it comes to court cases? And what happens if that bleeds out into, say, low-level criminal cases? So, for example, larceny cases. You're probably dealing with very similar cases when it comes to larceny. Somebody was in an area they weren't supposed to. There might be breaking and entering. There might be battery. There might be assault. Various details are going to change, but the very core, the actual core of the case is going to stay the same. And using an AI tool, it's just sort of like, here it is, spit out what I need to say, and stop thinking about it. And I think that's going to happen. I think more likely than not, that is going to become a problem for the legal field over the next decade. I think it is going to take some adjusting. I think we will. I am pretty optimistic that 10 years from now, we're going to be better situated at dealing with these sorts of tools and things like ChatGPT and such. But outside of that, I just think it's gonna be rough. We're gonna have controversy after controversy where somebody just basically says, look, it's not my fault. The ChatGPT told me to say this or cite this, and that's going to get a lot of people in some hot water. But it will be interesting to see. I do want to keep an eye on that, given that law is still a possibility within my future. So gonna have to see how that develops over time. All right. Other than that, yeah, that's essentially all the interesting things I've been paying attention to. Not everything, but those were the ones that I felt most like talking about. Still trying to adjust to the full schedule. At this point, I believe I'm getting it down pat, and I'll be able to actually get myself into more of a work mode to get some of my other projects off the ground, especially with some of these publications I'm looking at, and then actually getting some bigger project done with this whole channel. Anyway, if you've stuck around for this long, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a good one.